Welcome back, everyone. We are about to kick off into week 4. And with that said, we wanted to put together a decent list of start sits for you going into week 4. Primarily, we focus in Dynasty, but this applies definitely to all leagues when it comes down to it. So, what we're going to give you is we're going to give you at least one start sit for each position out there, outside of kicker and defense, because you can figure that out for yourselves. But we think some of these players have a really good benefit versus some of the defense that they're against. And we also think some of these people that we are benching are probably people you guys might actively be playing. Just keep in mind, sometimes you don't have another option when it comes down to it, but you may want to look into some ulterior players if you can. All right, with that, Sam, I'll kick it over to you to get us started.
Yeah, for week 4 for the quarterback position, we picked one player you really should absolutely be starting in most cases, and one player you should really be avoiding. Our QB start for the week is Jaden Daniels versus the Cardinals. Jaden Daniels just had an amazing game on Monday Night Football against the Bengals here. He really looks like he is the QB of this rookie class who's going to be fantasy relevant and take off. He was accurate on deep balls. He's still very good in the quick game. And what's always important for fantasy, he uses his legs and he has rushing upside and will score rushing touchdowns. As for our sit for the week, this guy we were hoping would be much better. He was probably drafted as a top 5 QB this year, but it's Anthony Richardson versus the Steelers. Richardson has struggled horribly in his past 2 matchups. They have been a lot easier than the Steelers, who he's about to face. I think he's an avoid for the time being if you can. If you can get a streamer like Sam Darnold instead, I'm more comfortable with Darnold than I am with Richardson at this point of the year.
Yeah, Richardson has been a disappointment to say the least. Definitely makes me a little happy that I avoided him in some of our new dynasty drafts just because his performance just has not been good, to say the least. Next, running back. So we got a few starts here for you. We're going to give you 2 on the running back side, and then we'll give you 2 sits of other people you may be considering starting as well. Our first start here is Tony Pollard against the Dolphins. We're justifying this one with a reeling Dolphins team that is just struggling on all fronts when it comes down to it. It's a shame. I actually hate to see what is going on with that team. But when it comes to football, there is no rest. You're going to go out there and play a team no matter how good or how banged up they are. And I expect Pollard to have a nice rebound game this week. Next pick actually hinges on whether or not Joe Mixon plays this week. We know he's no longer signaled to be out. He's been switched to questionable. So there's a possibility that he plays, but we know he didn't practice today, which is Wednesday, the 25th. So jury's out whether or not he'll play. But if he is sitting, then Cam Akers is definitely a start against the Jags defense, which hasn't done much of anything. The next one, we got some sits sitting here for you. My first sit here is going to be Rachaad White against the Eagles. The Eagles pretty much shut down Alvin Kamara this past week against the Saints. They looked really good. They looked like they finally woke back up on that defensive line. Hopefully it sticks for my bias here as an Eagles fan, but Rachaad White's efficiency on the ground has been limited already, and I can't even say Bucky Irvin's eaten into him too much. He's eaten into it, but the rushing game of the Bucs in general has not been good. If you take away the 2 long runs that Bucky Irvin has had over the start of this year, he's got like 2 30-yard runs. Their average is like 4 yards per carry, which is like in the bottom of the league. I think it's like 27th in the league, which is not good. He's still going to get his reception targets, but you're not going to see him putting in 60, 70 yards with those reception targets. The next sit is someone who's been kind of a resurgence, a bit of a darling, the beginning of the fantasy year here, and that's J.K. Dobbins. I'm staying away from him this week. He did not have a great week this past week, and he's going against the Chiefs that have been doing a pretty solid job when it comes to their run defense. So I'd be benching him this week, see how he does, and possibly bring it back next week depending on how it goes.
Yeah, no, Dobbins, and I think the whole Chargers offense is going to be pretty limited with Herbert out or just even like a little banged up and not really mobile. Going to be tough to start anyone on the Chargers this week. As for wide receiver, our start sit for week 4, we've got 2 wide receivers for you for starts. Our first one is Terry McLaurin versus the Cardinals. We picked Jaden Daniels as our start QB for the week. And as a part of that, we think Terry McLaurin's value is going to steadily rise throughout the season as well. Now that the Commanders seem to have unleashed Daniels a little bit, they're letting him throw the deep ball. McLaurin's going to be the biggest benefactor there. There's really no one else on Washington who's going to compete for those targets. Maybe have Luke McCaffrey in the slot or De'Ami Brown or Noah Brown, I think, at this point, too. So McLaurin should be one of the biggest benefactors of this kind of coming out party for Jaden Daniels here. Our second start wide receiver for the week is going to be Khalil Shakir versus the Ravens. Both the Ravens and the Bills are very good teams, and we saw this past week both of them get out to very early leads and then just kind of run the ball. I think this is going to be a good matchup where both teams are going back and forth. I think both teams are going to have to air it out a bit. And right now, it looks like Khalil Shakir is the number one wide receiver for Josh Allen and the Bills. I expect a lot of targets and volume this game, and I would hope at least for like a 12, 13-point floor from Khalil Shakir this week. As for our wide receiver sits, our first one, you might not have many better options than him to put into your lineup, but we are sitting Garrett Wilson versus the Broncos where we can. The Broncos over the past 2 weeks have only allowed 13 points to their opponents, and Pat Surtain has showed he is willing to get PIs and holding penalties against him every single time if it prevents the person he's guarding from catching the ball. When you factor that in and that Garrett Wilson and Rodgers just haven't really clicked yet, I just don't see this being a huge week for Garrett Wilson, really. Our other sit for the week, this guy, he's probably moving to your bench already, but we have Michael Pittman versus the Steelers. Again, we're tying this. The Colts offense as a whole has been pretty horrific with Richardson at QB. There's not a ton of passing volume there. We've now had 2 out of 3 weeks where Richardson's only completed 9 passes. And Pittman was a volume guy. And he's not seeing it already. And he's definitely not seeing it versus the Steelers. So those are 2 wide receivers I'm avoiding at all costs if I can.
All right, and let's get into our last section, which is the paltry tight ends of the league that just don't do anything except for like 1 or 2 of them every single week. Going into week 4 for the tight end start and sit, this is an absolute must start if he is on your team, and that's Dallas Goedert against the Bucks. I'm sure by now everyone's seen what he did in week 3 when he popped off for 10 catches, 170 yards, 2 really deep catches and runs. He got tuckered out on one of them. That's how far he was running all over the field. The only concern, he was listed as questionable as of today. He did not practice today. He was seen just catching balls off to the sideline. So hopefully that's just a minor thing, giving him a little bit of time off. But I'm expecting him to be in. And the other big reason here is A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are not expected to play this week. That leaves Jahan Dotson and Dallas Goedert as like the best options for Jalen Hurts to throw to, which is really kind of sad because even Britton Covey had to leave the last game with a shoulder injury, which I don't know what the update on him is right now. So if he's not there, it's going to be very weak. You're going to see Jahan Dotson and Paris Campbell, and then you're going to see Dallas Goedert just out there being the only one really to eat. The sit, I think at this point after 3 weeks, you got to sit Mark Andrews this week, especially against the Bills defense, which has been shutting almost everyone down to begin with. Mark Andrews, something is clearly off in the tight end room in general, because outside of week 1 with Likely, their tight ends have pretty much done nothing. Granted, Lamar Jackson's the quarterback. You know he's going to be running the ball a lot, and obviously they got up ahead really quick this past week. But Mark Andrews has just been off to a really, really slow start. I would not start him if I could start someone else this week. Until you see him get back into a groove since he's come back from that injury, at this stage, I would guess you would probably have to avoid him if, you don't want to eat the bullet of just getting 3, 4, 5, or 6 points from your tight end. Which, who's to know? That's the majority of the tight ends anyway, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, Andrews is basically a 6th lineman for the Ravens at this point, so
yeah, he has been
not looking good for him. And yeah, no, I don't think there's anyone this week outside of maybe Dalton Kincaid that I would think has a better week than Dallas Goedert as like my week 4 expectation. So Yeah, and if you have Goddard, fire him up. I think he'll have another big week.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to eat a bit this week, which is going to be wonderful for the Eagles team. But they're banged up, so we'll see how they perform against the Bucs when it comes down to it. With that said, we're going to wrap this up here. That's it for our start sits. We definitely love to hear what you guys think. Are we off on any of these guys? I don't think we are. I think we're going to be missing it next week. We'll definitely recap and see how we performed. With that said, enjoy week 4, everyone. There we go. Nice 10-minute video.